básicamente porque es un conferenciante fascinante, no solamente por la forma que tiene de explicar las cosas, sino por lo que explica, sino porque también es el coordinador de toda esta historia. Él es Chris Aubeck, él pertenece al grupo Change, ya se ha explicado durante el transcurso de esta plataforma, también coautor junto a Jacques Vallee, aquí presente, de Wonders in the Sky. Y él es uno de esos investigadores, una de esas personas que yo creo que el presente trata injustamente. Y lo hace porque su trabajo, creo que por una gran parte del público, es injustamente valorado, ya que no es de todo consciente de la importancia del mismo. Tendremos que dejar pasar seguramente unos años y unas décadas para que sean los aficionados a estas cuestiones los que se den cuenta de la valía que tuvo el mismo, ¿no? Pero bueno, como creo que aquí estamos personas inteligentes, vais a saber apreciar en el presente y como cuando debe hacerse, quizá no tanto en el futuro, en este caso la labor de un historiador de la ufología y de un investigador como es Chris Aubeck, para el cual quiero pedir un fortísimo aplauso.
Y Chris, cuando quieras.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, that's great. Right, so this couple of days have been very special because we've had some very, very special guests with us. And the event itself is very unique, very special because it's very difficult to get people together for a couple of days, 8 hours of speaking about UFOs in history. And it's something which I've been dealing with the last, I'd say about 25 years, 30 years of my life. I was just telling Jacques Vallee the other day that when I was about 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, I'd play truant from school and just go to the library, the university library, sit there and go through ancient books, old newspapers, magazines, journals, looking for something interesting, looking for mythology, folklore, cases of elves and fairies and UFOs and so on. And that's basically how I became interested in this subject. Now, this is what I normally do. It's the case of where do UFOs come from? So I've given this subtitle, The Cultural History of the Extraterrestrial Visitation Debate. And there are three questions which I'm particularly interested in, three questions which have driven me over the years to continue my search. And it's not because I'm skeptical of the existence of UFOs. In fact, in 1996, I myself saw one in the village of Talarrubias in Badajoz. And I saw it with other people, so I know that it actually exists. I mean, there is something there. But that's not what I find the most interesting. I find that the social impact, the impact on the human mind, our beliefs, our belief systems, that's what really motivates me to continue my research. So there are three questions which I'm interested in. The first one is, when did the world start to register UFO sightings? The second question is, how long have people believed in extraterrestrials? And the third is, when did people start believing in alien visitors? Three completely different questions. They're not necessarily linked. When did the world start to register UFO sightings? Well, what is a UFO? I mean, it's an unidentified flying object. If we look back in time, we can find clues in art, in manuscripts, that show us that people didn't really understand yet what the moon was, what the sun was, what the stars were. For them, these objects were unidentified, and they seemed to be flying, and they were objects. So there's a lot of depictions in ancient art of this kind of thing. It doesn't mean that these are spaceships. It doesn't mean that these are a mysterious phenomena. Most of the time when we look at ancient art, they're actually depictions of the moon, of the planets, constellations, and so on. But, okay, this is when the idea of UFOs crystallized, really, because people had to find a reason, they had to decide what these things were. Now, in the year 2003, I founded a group on the internet called Magonia Exchange. And really, this conference owes very much to the people of the group, Magonia Exchange, because over the last 12 years, we've been working together to collect ancient documents, any historical information about unidentified flying objects. And we've expanded that category. Now we're looking for any kind of mysterious phenomena in general, but we still look at the topic of UFOs in particular because it's really a topic of our time. It reflects what worries us, what concerns us in the modern world, because it's a technological artifact of our time, really. So we collect manuscripts like this, for example. A lot of German manuscripts, publications, before newspapers existed, they showed a lot of mysterious phenomena in the sky, which really were UFOs, in the sense that these were unidentified flying objects. Of course, here we have some like ball-shaped things, spheres, and even some crosses. There are many, many manuscripts of this kind, but not only manuscripts with illustrations, of course. There's a lot of text out there, and it's only been since the introduction of the internet that we've been able to do searches in whole libraries. Now we don't need to spend years and years going through documents and folders and so on in libraries, ruining our eyesight and just going mad, basically, like Don Quixote, for example. I mean, we don't need to do this anymore. Charles Fort did this, of course, at the beginning of the 20th century, and later he complained about his eyesight. These days, we can search whole libraries just with a single press of a button, just like Google. So we find a lot of information very quickly, and we found about 40,000 things over the last 12 years. And 40,000, I mean, that's quite a lot of cuttings that haven't seen the light of day since they were published maybe 150 or 200 years ago. In the year 2010, we published this book, Jacques Vallee and I, talking about, well, it's a collection of 500 cases from history, which we consider to be anomalous. And the first edition of the book goes straight from ancient Egypt up to the year 1879, which is when we have this cut-off point at 1879, because it's when we understand that that's when aerial technology existed, aviation technology began to flourish, whether it was early forms of dirigible balloons or whatever. I mean, that's when it was easy to confuse some kind of technology sent into the sky with something anomalous. So that's where we cut off our exploration of cases. But 500 cases is pretty good going, really. And we have 40,000 cases, as I said, in the group. What interests me particularly, as I said, is not the phenomena itself. Of course, that's very interesting. I'm very interested in the way that it has generated a lot of mythology over the last 200 years or more, and particularly since 1947, when UFOs or flying saucers were first seen in America. And what I try to do with my work, what I spend my time doing, is to eliminate, or at least show that there's a lot of mythology that isn't at all necessary that surrounds the topic. I mean, UFO phenomena should be something that scientists pay a lot of interest or attention to, because we were talking about manifestations that we don't understand, of luminous phenomena in the sky, sometimes non-luminous phenomena, but it's something which people should pay a lot of attention to, as they did to meteorites originally, and look for an answer. Science needs to look for an answer to this problem. So here, for example, we see this kind of thing. We have the spheres and whatever, the dancing in the sky. But people have invented a vast amount of mythology, legends, folk tales, to accompany that really cloud the issue. They confuse people. There's so much UFO mythology, you put the word UFO in Google, and you just find very strange images, you find very strange ideas, authors who believe they are the chosen ones, and so on. They have contact with extraterrestrials. They really have contact with their publishers that demand more and more books every year, and that's really the reason all this exists. But it's possible still to get back to what the phenomena is and look at the raw data. So these are just examples, and I've got to go very quickly. We don't have too much time. But this is an example of what we consider in general to be UFO mythology. Here on the left here's a list of the Anunnaki, for example, made famous by Zecharia Sitchin in the 1970s. If you go into the actual manuscripts that he supposedly used, I mean, you don't find references to Anunnaki, you don't find references to this kind of thing. He made it famous, he said that they were aliens. It's not there. It's just not there. It's not in the ancient texts at all. They mention it very, very lightly. Roswell, pyramids, these are the topics that keep coming up. I've never understood what the connection is between pyramids and UFOs, to be honest. I don't see a connection at all. But it was made famous in the 1970s by authors who looked for ancient astronauts, the idea that aliens visited the planet. This really clouds the issue. It confuses the issue, and it confuses scientists who begin to think that it's all about that UFOs are just all about that. Reptilians and so on and so on. Then what we should be concentrating on are sightings, field research, meta-analysis, the actual analysis of the information we have of that raw data. It's still possible. It's not too late. It's only been, 70 years since UFOs started to become popular. And, of course, statistical analysis. All of this I've been working on with Jacques Vallee for the last 12 or 13 years, and finally we're getting somewhere with it. Okay, after that book, here's another book which will be published later on in the year with another scientist called Martin Schoff. It's another very detailed analysis of 22 cases. And we don't have any bias at all. We're not looking for extraterrestrials or interdimensional beings. Exactly the same with Jacques Vallee. We don't have the answers. But there are 22 very deep analyses of cases using all kinds of genealogical records, meteorological information, things that weren't available before the internet came into existence. And so it is possible to do good analysis. Okay, so that's when did the world start to register UFO sightings? A very long time ago. How long have people believed in extraterrestrials? This is a subject that has been given some attention, a scholarly attention by university professors over the last few decades. We can start with the Greeks, for example. The earliest references to the possibility of a plurality of inhabited worlds are found in the writings of the ancient Greeks who studied what they believed in atomism. Not all of them, of course. We're only talking about a group. There are many different theories at that time. Atomism is the idea that atoms exist. A long time before atoms were proved, their existence were proved, they already believed in this. And they said that if atoms are floating through the universe in practically the same way, as there's life on this planet, there must be life elsewhere. For example, Epicurus said in the 4th century before Christ, there are infinite worlds, both like and unlike ours, for the atoms, being infinite in number, are born far out into space. Worlds like ours, this is the idea. So that's where extraterrestrials, or the idea of extraterrestrials was born. And then immediately Aristotle came along and he said, no way, because the universe is actually, it's closed. There's nothing beyond the stars. He came up with a model of the cosmos which didn't allow for any planets, galaxies, or beings anywhere outside the region of our stars. He believed it was basically a sphere divided into multiple layers. So for a very long time, because Aristotle's theory became dominant, especially in Europe later on in medieval times, there wasn't the possibility that extraterrestrials existed at all. However, in Asian countries, there was. We'll see that in a moment. And also, even during Aristotle's time and after it, some people still did believe in the possibility that the moon, at least, was inhabited by people. So we have Lucian's True History, which Juanjo mentioned earlier on, which was from 150 AD, where he speaks about visiting the moon pretty much accidentally. There were people, there was a war and so on, and it was all about the colonization of Venus. Looking at Asian sources, which weren't affected by Aristotle's world vision, we have the tale of the bamboo cutter, or the tale of Princess Kaguya. And this was a princess that was found in a field, and a farmer finds her. She turns out to be the most beautiful woman in Japan. And later on it's revealed that she's from the moon and that there will be an invasion of moon people that will arrive with their technology to invade the Earth and to kidnap her and take her back to the moon. So we can see that even in the 11th century, 10th century in Japan, they were already speculating about invasions of people from other worlds. Normally the moon. They made a movie of this a couple of years ago. Very beautiful cartoon if you have the chance to see it. It's a work of art. Well, when the Aristotelian theory was dominant in Europe, people were not allowed, practically, to speculate about worlds beyond our own. Then the Bishop of France at that moment, Etienne Tempier, said, well, let's look at all the dogma that says that God cannot have created other worlds. Let's think about this. We shouldn't be putting limits to God's abilities, really. So he opened up a little bit, a little philosophical window there, so people from that point on could start to discuss extraterrestrials for the first time openly. It didn't mean that they always believed in them, but at least they could publish about them freely. If we look through the Enlightenment, for example, from the 17th to the 18th centuries, by this time the idea of extraterrestrials was definitely flourishing in the world. Philosophers, intellectuals were writing about this possibility. So there was a lot of books published in this period speculating about life in the sun, on the moon, on other planets, and so on. It was very interesting. Michael J. Crow, who's the Professor Emeritus in Humanities at the University of Notre Dame, said at least a majority of the leading Enlightenment intellectuals entered the extraterrestrial life debate, the great majority favoring the idea of a plurality of worlds. So we can see that it became an extremely popular topic. What today looks like something from science fiction, it looks like a product of the 21st century, in fact, was spoken about 300 years ago or more. And then we can see some famous names here. Galileo Galilei thought that there might be life on the moon, for example. René Descartes wrote that God could easily have created life on other planets. John Wilkins put life directly on the moon. Fontenelle, whose book was in the forbidden list of books and was forbidden by the Vatican for a very long time, until the 20th century, in fact, he said that obviously the worlds out in space were populated. And so on and so on. So we find the intellectuals of the Enlightenment and just afterwards were very obsessed with the topic of extraterrestrials. It's nothing new. There are a lot of scholarly works, academic publications in recent decades on this topic. It's no longer taboo. In many countries you can talk about this now. In America, for example, people talk about this openly. It's not a problem. Sometimes I find that in Spain it's a bit embarrassing to talk about this. It's as if, because there's not much science fiction being generated here, there's not a lot of speculation about life on other planets either. But it's fine. You can talk about this quite openly these days. People do. Then the idea of aliens and extraterrestrial life became an important part of religion too in the 19th century. In fact, the 18th century with Swedenborg, he introduced the idea that you could have contact with beings on other planets. The Mormons, Joseph Smith, founder of the Mormons, he didn't write directly about extraterrestrials in the Book of Mormon, but all the publications by the Mormons from that point on talked about the idea that God was living on another planet. There are reports by Mormons of dreams of extraterrestrials coming to Earth and spreading the good word. The Seventh-day Adventists, too, talked about the next coming of Christ. They believed that Christ would come in through the Orion Nebula, and that if we prayed hard enough, he would get nearer and nearer to the Earth. And they had a certain day specified for when Christ would finally arrive on Earth, and they all prayed together. Unfortunately, he didn't arrive. They didn't pray hard enough, so he got stuck in the air. It's actually true. He was trapped in the sky, and they said, well, we need to pray a little bit more to get him to come a bit closer. Never happened, though. Then we can talk a little bit about spoofs and hoaxes. From the 19th century, people already accepted the idea that extraterrestrials existed. It was possible at that time to talk about people in the sky, people on other planets. So it wasn't so strange to find the first hoaxes in the first decades of the 19th century. This one, published in 1809, talks about the moon, and it ejects a purple-colored sphere which opens up, and the man comes out. And it was all, in fact, it was a parody in a sense. It just represented a money for sex or rights for sex scandal that was happening in England at that time, when a woman was sleeping with the king and giving people titles, special titles, like the general of a military man or whatever, in exchange for sex. That's how it was working. So, I mean, the idea of extraterrestrials as a hoax was introduced into England through sex and a scandal, which is a strange idea. The Great Moon Hoax of 1835 deceived the whole world, practically. Everyone believed in it because a famous astronomer said that he'd seen people on the moon with wings. And this was published. It was all the work of a man, a journalist called Richard Adams Locke. But it was a time when these things were possible. People were already talking about extraterrestrials. How are we going to communicate with them? Then we get to the question of aliens in literature, because, of course, if everyone's talking about aliens, then people are going to write about them, write fiction about them, poems about them, novels, and so on. So it begins really in the 18th century, 1752, Micromegas, written by Voltaire, about two extraterrestrials, gigantic extraterrestrials that come to Earth and start talking to Earth people who, for them, are microscopic size. And have philosophical conversations with them. And when they leave a book for Earthlings to read that they said contains all the secrets, everything that's known about life, the universe, and everything. When the Earth people open this gigantic book, they find all the pages are completely blank. Then in 1775, we have the first UFO crash in French literature. We normally find it was French people who are coming up with all these ideas for a long period. It was a man from Mercury who crashes on Earth. Then, curiously enough, in Mexico, around the same time, 1775, the first science fiction book was published, and here too we're speaking about life on other planets, life on the moon, and so on. And it was written by a friar called Manuel Antonio de Ribas, who was a very old man and a very rebellious person who used to sit cross-legged during congregations, and he would insult people, and he was a very difficult old man, and he was finally caught by the Inquisition, who allowed him to go free because of his old age. But we still have the manuscripts in which he speaks about a moon that exploded, visits to the moon, all of this happening in the 18th century. Something that I find quite interesting, you might have heard the children's song, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I know a lot of kids are obsessed with this when they start to learn English in Spain, and it basically goes, Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder, and so on. This was actually composed by a poet called Jane Taylor, an Englishwoman. who died in 1824. And she also composed a short story called How It Strikes a Stranger, basically meaning how it impresses a stranger, about a man from another planet who arrives on Earth and his impressions of what Earth life is like. So whenever I hear now Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, or its translations into other languages, I remember the person who wrote it and how really she was pretty obsessed with the idea of visitors from other planets. Now, the third question, which I spend most of my time trying to answer, is when did people start believing in alien visitors? It's not the same to believe that they're out there somewhere in the cosmos, and the possibility that they're actually here on Earth or they're visiting us in some way. In the late 60s, early 70s, Erich von Däniken, a Swiss author, became famous by publishing the book Chariots of the Gods. The original was in German, of course. The idea here being that our gods were probably astronauts, aliens from other planets, and that they were responsible for creating the statues on the Easter Island, the pyramids, all this kind of thing, which really is practically a racist idea. The idea is that our ancestors weren't capable of creating these things for themselves. Of course they were, and this is the key. People these days are so intrigued by the idea of ancient aliens. Maybe they were here inventing, I don't know, giving us technology that we didn't know how to use, or building pyramids for us, or teaching us how to do it. All these ideas, they're very, very old, in fact. We'll see in a moment how old those are. And there's no reason for it. Our ancestors were perfectly capable of creating their own monuments, buildings, technology. I mean, that's the story of human civilization. But anyway, this year, Juanjo and I are publishing a book about UPARTs, which is a very popular topic. The Americans used to find screws and other technology embedded in coal, embedded in strange places inside rocks. And this has become a popular subject. UPARTs means out-of-place artifacts. The idea is that maybe our ancestors were able to produce advanced technology, and then this somehow got buried like dinosaur fossils. Unfortunately, there are no UPARTs. It was all part of a kind of nationalistic drive in the United States in the 19th century. There was a lot of competition at the time between Europe and America. The Europeans were saying, our dinosaur fossils are much bigger than your tiny American dinosaur fossils. We are much better than you are. So the Americans would come back with, no, we have these massive bones, these huge Tyrannosaurus leg bones. Oh, well, but our culture is much older in Europe than your terrible Red Indians. And so the Americans started inventing UPARTs too, and this became a very popular subject. And they said, no, but we had screws and hammers and things like this. You just had bricks and mortar and pillars. But the Europeans didn't pay much attention to this, which is why you don't find a lot of UPARTs in European newspapers of the period. The idea that ancient astronauts visited the Earth and built our monuments and gave us culture and technology is extremely old, and this is something that people don't know about. In general, I spent years looking at this myself, and until I realized that it's a very, very old idea. Francis Goodwin, a bishop in England in the 16th century, said that North American Indians were probably from the moon, for example. Cyrano de Bergerac said Adam and Eve had come from the moon. Daniel Defoe said Chinese people had come from the moon. Maybe he was right, I don't know. Then we started looking at other authors. 18th century, Nicholas Edney said that Noah and Abraham had come from Venus. You can see how old this idea is. Francois Chabrier said that human ancestors had come from a planet that exploded at some time in the past, and parts of that planet had fallen on the Earth, and that some of the artifacts that we see today are actually from them. They're from that planet. So it's a very old idea, 1823. Jacques Boucher in 1841 generally said that humans had also come from another planet. Very long time ago, they didn't have any proof, as we don't have any proof these days, but it shows that people are always looking towards the stars, looking for something to say that we are special, our ancestors are special, someone must have built the monuments. It just goes on and on. Maigron in 1866 said humans had come from the moon. Baron d'Espierre de Cologne had a great idea. He said that the planet exploded and that this explains showers of falling fish, for example, that continue to fall since then. Frogs found inside rocks, they must have come here from the moon or from another planet. It's incredible what people began to think. A French guy called Auguste Dufresne in 1870 said that Australia itself, it didn't contain pieces of technology that might have come from the sky. He said that Australia itself had fallen from the sky, that Australia was an asteroid that had fallen into the Pacific Ocean, and that is what caused the universal deluge. And he says that the Aborigines were obviously aliens, and so we can take their lands, because anything that falls into our territory must belong to us. And they're too stupid, he said, to know what to do with that land anyway. So kangaroos are from another planet, you know, and it's incredible. All these, I don't know, all these amazing Australian free film stars that you know, and they probably explain something, you know, culturally. Around the beginning of the 19th century, the idea an idea was invented to explain the fall of meteorites. No one knew exactly what meteorites were, or even if they truly existed. But finally it was decided that maybe there were volcanoes on the moon which ejected rocks into the sky, because there are volcanoes on Earth, so why not on the moon too, doing the same thing? And those massive rocks would fall to Earth somehow, being attracted by our planet. Of course, this gave rise to a lot of other stories, and people began to use this idea. A poet, Horace Smith, in 1818, talks about a man. He says he was a human aerolite ejected from some moon volcano. So the idea of people coming to Earth, very old one. And before, people thought they were ejected by volcanoes because there was no technology. Aviation hadn't been invented yet. So they had to think of some mechanism for it. In a book called Sketches of London, published in 1838, another guy, James Grant, says, a man falls from the moon. He looked as if he'd fallen from the moon. So this idea obviously was a part of human imagination for a very long time. There was a French dramatist called Pierre-Augustin Bouchemas, and when he died, he was accused posthumously of not having written his works himself. So someone came out with a spoof manuscript, like a joke, saying, well, he's now on the moon, and he's quite angry, and he's saying, well, I really was responsible for my works, but while I'm here on the moon, let me tell you that it's not volcanoes that send meteors to Earth, it's actually the inhabitants of the moon who are our descendants. When they die, they go to the moon. That's the basic idea. That's why he was there. And they're sending letters to Earthlings. That's why meteorites arrive on Earth, because they're containing letters to their descendants or to their grandchildren and so on. So the idea of messages coming from space is a very old one itself. Now, what interests me, of course, are the idea of artifacts, extraterrestrial artifacts, and I investigate all of the cases that I find. I don't reject them thinking that they're nonsense. I'm always looking for one that might be true. The earliest one that I can find is from 1847, which is interesting because 1947 is when UFOs really took off in the United States. And it seems that ufology divides itself into convenient 50-year periods. But the first case that I can find is from 1847, and a meteorite or an object fell in Arkansas, and they thought it looked like the bust of a human being, so obviously it was sculpted by someone on another planet. There's a case from 1857. This is where people began seeing UFOs. It was published in 1857, but I've been looking into this case for a very long time, and I know that the village that it describes only existed between 1839 and 1842, so it's probably older than that. And it occurred in a place called Jay, Ohio. People go out of their houses and they see a massive ship fly over the sky, and the pilots are not human. We know they're not spirits or ghosts or anything like that, because they're about 2 meters high, 3 meters high. They're giant. So this is the first time that extraterrestrials were ever discussed in history, really. And I went there last October. I visited Jay, Ohio. I spent about 1.5 years looking for it, maybe 2 years, trying to find it on old maps. A friend of mine, Kay Massingill, invited me to America. We spent a great time going to all these different places where these strange events had taken place. So I spent some time here. There's nothing there these days. There's no point looking for traces of UFOs on the ground or anything like that. There's just a field. There's nothing there, but we had a good time anyway. Then in 1862, that was 1857, and then it started accelerating. 1862, a Belgian newspaper published a story about an object, an artifact that had fallen in Jamaica, and it falls in a beautiful valley. There's a horse and carriage that stops. 3 men get out, one of whom is called Dr. Hopkins. He inspects the object, and he sees that it's actually an arch from another planet. It's a building that's exploded or something like that, and it's been sent through the universe, and he finds hieroglyphics on it and little pictures and things. What it shows is that the whole idea of Roswell, crashed aliens, really was born around this period. This idea of finding objects with hieroglyphics written on them. This is when it started. Then, just a year or so later, Henry de Parville said that, he wrote an article that was theoretically true, too, about a meteorite that falls. A meteor is flying through space, and a meteorite is something that you find on the ground, so you don't get confused with the two terms. He finds a giant meteorite. Inside the meteorite, there's a mummy, a kind of manuscript with hieroglyphics on it. And so we can see here, these are the seeds of the Roswell myth. It never ended. Throughout the 19th century, up to 1947, it's just a continuation of this legend. In 1865, in the Rocky Mountains, now in America, a guy finds a meteorite, and there's like hieroglyphics and things. It destroys a part of the terrain, and so on. Then, jumping into 1873, we find a very interesting case from Zanesville, Ohio, in which it talks about an object seen by 2 farmers, a man and his son, that flies through the sky, and it's like a meteor. There's a lot of flames and fire and whatever, smoke, and then it lands. It doesn't crash as meteorites normally do. It lands quite pacifically, and it opens up, and a man comes out dressed in black, carrying a lantern, and this guy gets into a car that doesn't have wheels. There are no horses, and it drives off down the highway and disappears. This was before the invention of cars. This was before the invention of flying objects. Is this case true? I don't know. I have absolutely no idea. We don't have the answers, but it's very interesting that if it was imagined, they would have to imagine the concept of a car, a flying vehicle, and everything else. And this is a man in black, so it's a very interesting case that we investigated in great detail. And I also went there with my friend Kay when I went to Ohio in October to investigate the terrain. All the details seem to be correct. It seems to be based, the article seems to reflect something that happened in this place. The story I mentioned before by Henry de Parville about the meteorite with the mummy inside, he didn't die in 1864. It was transferred to South America, Central America. It came to life again. People just changed the fear of the places, but it continued. The whole myth, the whole legend just continued. People didn't stop believing in crashed objects containing mummies, pilots, and so on. We start looking at other artifacts. It's incredible. There's just so many things. In 1883, Rondout Creek in New York, a giant sword falls into a river. They inspect it. It also has hieroglyphics written on it. And obviously it's a sword of some warrior, some man who's lost it. Maybe he threw it too high. There was an explosion. Who knows? And it traveled through space, landed in a river in New York. Is it true? No, it's not. Okay. course it's not. 1884. Again, in St. Petersburg, people were woken up from their sleep early in the morning, huge explosions, bang, bang, what's going on? Is it the nihilists? Are they attacking? All these things happening. What happened was there were these huge meteorites that had fallen down. They were on the ground. Someone opened one up and there was money inside. It's like a whole series of meteorites containing extraterrestrial beings. 1884. Not true at all. But in any case, it's interesting. This just precedes everything that came after it. All these UFO crashes that we hear in the newspapers, we know where they come from. They come from this. So between 1880 and 1887, I found 23 meteorites inscribed with hieroglyphics in different reports, 7 meteorites carrying passengers, like alien beings, 24 novels and short stories about messages and Martians that fall to Earth. These are the seeds of modern ufology. That's why we have to look at the phenomena themselves, not the mythology. We shouldn't get confused about what is really, what UFO means. It means the objects, the phenomena, the strange lights, not the myths that surround it. We don't have time, but here's a whole list of things. A plant fallen from the sky, a meteorite with a frog inside. They open it up, there's a frog. It starts to swim around in a bucket of water. Objects engraved with hieroglyphics, all kinds of things. A fish falls from the sky with a hook in its mouth in America. Most of these things were happening in America at that point. It's not a big coincidence that UFOs became so important in America later on. From this point on, we don't find other countries represented in newspapers very often. It's mainly the States. And of course, this is where the great airship wave between 1896, approximately, and 1897, approximately started. People started seeing craft in the sky, piloted by extraterrestrials. Again, this was a big national obsession throughout the 19th century. 1908 in Norway, of all places. It was an April Fool's joke, but people were fascinated. They really believed it. They put a big spacecraft, made of wood, really, in a field, and they had some pilots, just Norwegian people, and they were saying, hello, we're aliens, we're from another planet, we're here to say hello, and so on and so on. Of course, it was an April Fool's joke, but the fact that it came from 1908 is fascinating. It shows that there's always been this fascination with hoaxing, with jokes, with inventing so many things. And there really were real UFO phenomena going on at the same time. People weren't interested in that. They were interested in UFO mythology. We can also find extraterrestrials in folklore, too, throughout the 19th century. Evans Wentz, a folklorist, was visiting people throughout Ireland and then Wales, looking at fairy folklore. Some people told him that fairies had actually come from other planets. So we can see there must have been a subcurrent here of rumors and speculation about extraterrestrials in general. It's a very old subject. Now, this is a subject which I've started looking at in the last year. I realized that I find so many cases of people who they're slightly crazy. I mean, throughout history, they've said that they're from other planets and things like that. Obviously, if you are hallucinating that you've come from another planet, if you are so paranoid that I don't know, you believe that you're being chased by aliens, it must be something which is in the human mind. It must be something which people are thinking about quite often. So there were 65 cases between 1880 and 1920 of people who claim to have come from other planets. Then 20 cases I've found so far of people afraid aliens are coming to get them. They're going to abduct them or take them or kill them in that period. There was a movie in 2001 called K-Pax, which is all about a man who, he's in a mental institute. You might have seen this movie. Is he really an alien? Is he not an alien? Who knows? He says he's from another planet. He has a lot of wise things to say. Maybe, but he's locked into a mental institution. I don't know if the people who wrote this film used any sources, which we're going to mention now, but the coincidence is very interesting. This idea that, today in 2001, sure, it's understandable that someone's in a mental hospital, they believe they come from another planet. We've all seen Star Wars and Star Trek, and we've read comics and so on. But to find similar cases throughout the 19th century, it means that people were thinking about this a lot. In fact, if we go back to the 3rd century BC, Heracles Ponticus, a Greek astronomer and philosopher, stated he knew of a man who had fallen from the moon. This is the same idea, and this is like over 2,000 years ago, so obviously it's something that we do quite a lot. We have this on our minds. We're a little bit obsessed with the idea. I'm going to tell you some cases that I've found over the last year or so, which I find interesting because they're so old. 1885, there was a woman who believed that a strange flying object had landed on the roof of her house. She goes to the police. She tries to get the judge to stop this from happening, tries to get the police to come over. They all know her. She's slightly crazy. She gets locked up in a mental hospital. In 1889, there's a man in Melbourne who goes to the police and says, help me, we need to get 4,000 soldiers together because something's going to happen to the earth. We need to get 4,000 soldiers, get this message to the government urgently. And they say, okay, we'll do it. Okay, where do you get this information from? And he says, well, I'm from Jupiter. And of course I have this information. We know everything in Jupiter. And he said that he'd been on Earth for 28 years studying humans. He was locked up immediately in a mental hospital, of course. In 1892, a man said he'd come from the comet Biela. He'd arrived from this comet. He said that next Sunday the Earth would be destroyed in a ball of fire. We have to do something about it, please, and so on and so on. The doctors were amazed. He knew so much about astronomy, but he was locked up too in the mental hospital. 1896. Two people too. Two brothers. One said that he'd fallen in Canada, the other in the United States. I mean, these were arrested immediately too. A man in 1900 said he'd jumped from the moon. He was standing on a street corner. The police approached him. Where are you from? What are you doing? I just jumped from the moon. He tried to escape, but the police were chasing him down the street. And when they finally caught him, he said, look, I just jumped all the way from the moon. I'm sure I have the right to run away. These crazy ideas, anyway. In 1903, there was a Martian who enters a church. All these things really happened. A guy enters a church and starts talking, saying, I'm from Mars, I have a message to humans, and so on, and he starts talking to the congregation. Of course, he was arrested, thrown into this particular, into a mental hospital. In 1907, exactly the same thing happened. He said that he was 5,000 years old collecting information about the Earth. In 1908, a fireman, a man called the fire brigade, in fact, and he said, look, I'm a fireman, and there's a fire, I want to see how fast you get to this spot. And they ran there, and they got there to put out a fire. There was no fire. He said, I've come from Mars, I was just testing your fire alarm systems, that's all. He was arrested. There's a woman from Montana, Mrs. Jordan. She said that Jupiter was giving her orders. The judge said that she had a wonderful mind, a brilliant mind. She could read Latin and Greek. She'd written several books. Unfortunately, she was locked away because she thought that there was going to be a fusion between Jupiter and Earth. In 1911, a woman said that a man said that he'd been abducted and taken to another planet also. 1911, there's some very, very powerful cases we find. 1911, a man was found standing in a river. His mother at home with her stomach open. He'd actually killed his mother with a broken bottle, taken out her entrails, her intestines. He was arrested. He said, well, the Martians told me to do it. They were floating over my house. And they told me telepathically that I had to kill my mother because the only way to get to Mars is to kill her, basically, because she had an unborn child inside her. She was 69 years old. I don't think it was true, but he was trying to get the child out of her. The Martians said, it's the only way that you can possibly get to Mars. Today also, people, abductees are very obsessed with babies and children and so on. A woman kills herself. It says himself, should be herself. A woman kills herself and her 4 children because she believed a hostile UFO was pursuing her. These things were talked about a long time before flying saucers became a popular subject. So, just to finish very quickly then, there are a lot of theories about all this. What is all this about? What is all this about? I mean, is it literature? Is it a psychosocial? Is it a psychosocial phenomenon? Do people believe in this as a kind of paranoia? Is it a schizophrenia? Is it craziness? That's one theory. That's one idea. Maybe it's all transmitted as folklore, as between crazy people. Maybe. Some of this is. At least the myths might be. We've seen some cases of madness here. Maybe the myths. Not the phenomena themselves. They exist. I saw one. So I know that they exist. I have that empathy with a witness. We have to concentrate on the phenomena. Are they visitors from other planets? Possibly, but I don't think that the people that we've seen in this little presentation are visitors from other planets. This seems like the product of a very fertile human imagination. Misidentifications, that's true. Maybe UFOs sometimes are misidentifications. A lot of this is folklore. It follows the same patterns as folklore does, as folklore spreads, like folklore about elves and fairies, witches, and so on. It spreads like folklore quite often. And there are also hoaxes, of course, as we've just seen. They started in the 19th century, and they continue until today. So basically what I'm saying here is that, yes, there is a UFO phenomenon that we have to study. We've got a lot of cases together in this book with Jacques Vallee that I've written, and we're looking into the possibility that maybe people have seen strange things over time. There is a physical explanation, a scientific explanation. We're looking for that, but don't get confused with all the talk of Roswell and pyramids and all this kind of thing, which is just confusing the issue. The more you wonder about that, the more you talk about that and obsess with the Mayans and the Aztecs and this kind of thing, the less scientists are going to pay attention to the phenomenon, and we don't want that to happen. And that's all I have to say today.